What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another episode of Lions Latest, going through the latest Detroit Lions news. Hopefully, I don't sound extremely loud. I moved the gain down. I think it sounds a lot better now. The mic sounds normal. It's not crazy. And with that, today, we are going to be taking a look at the Detroit Lions first participation report of the week, as well as some bad news, unfortunately, that we got today. I really hate this, but we have to discuss it. Campbell and Todd Wash, we got to hear from both of these guys speaking to the media today. Of course, Dan Campbell on Wednesday is kind of his first thoughts on Minnesota, as well as Todd Wash, my favorite probably positional coach to listen to. I just love hearing about the D-line, and Todd Wash always keeps it honest. He holds it down. And finally, Vikings run, which sounds kind of weird. It's going to kind of tie in with the Todd Wash talk, just about their run game, because they talked about it on their side as well. So let's get it started.
Fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places, because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome, ready to another video. Glad you guys are here. Another episode of Lions Latest. This one has a little more juice to it. I really do. I think this one has a lot of energy coming with it this entire week, because not only is this a divisional game, which is always like, yeah, it's a divisional game, it's a big game, that kind of thing, but also us coming off of a win is huge. The Vikings are coming off a very tough loss. They're also in a short week, so they're looking to bounce back. They're coming back home. I think this game is huge. I think this could be a very big swing game. Not to the point if like you lose it, you're done or something like that, or if you win, you're guaranteed to make the playoffs, even though I think this would be huge. I feel like this is a monstrous swing game for the Lions potentially, because I think if you win this game on the road, of course, you're going to be, I think, at least tied for first with a division win being 1-0. Then you're coming back home to play Seattle, who's very beatable. Seattle at home, that's going to be fired up if you're coming off of back-to-back wins. And then New England Patriots, who, as we've seen so far this year, look like they have some issues scoring the football. They're still going to be difficult on the road, but I think it's very winnable. Then the bye week, and you're hoping they're getting back some of these playmakers offensively and defensively sooner rather than later. I think this could be a huge swing game for the Lions if they can pull this out on the road. I guess the spread is kind of wide right now, so it's not really expected that the Lions would do this, but I think it's huge. The Vikings are already 1-0 in the division. They're coming off a short week now, so they're right back to it, and they, like us last week, want to get that taste out of their mouth of losing 24-7, not scoring in the second half. So I think it's huge for both sides, and I also think this is one of the toughest teams on our schedule. I think coming into the year, I think I actually had us getting swept by the Vikings. It's tough, though, because you don't really know what the team's going to look like, so that may change. We'll do our prediction later on this week. However, I felt like this was very difficult, and I still do. Even though they're coming off a tough loss, you look at the roster, you look at the talent they have. Kevin O'Connell is still kind of new to this, but I like the pairing with him and the talent that they do have. We'll see where it goes, but especially on the road this early in the season, this team does really well at one thing, and that's run the football, as well as other things, but they run the football really well, and the Lions got to take care of that, as it says here. And of course, Justin Jefferson had some pretty big games against the Lions last year. Last year's games were entertaining as heck. Okay, we won one, we lost the other one, but they were both awesome to watch. It was our first win of the season. So with that, I'm excited to get into this one and discuss it, and this is kind of the intro into this game. So let's start with the participation report. It's going to be a little bit shortened in this one. That's because, well, I'll just say it now. The Minnesota Vikings didn't actually practice today, from what I understand. So while they have two players on their participation report, which is much shorter than it was last week, it definitely is going to be subject to change, because apparently they didn't actually practice. It was more meeting times, and Kevin O'Connell said the reason for that is because they're kind of still within 48 hours, and it's just something they did with LA, so they're going to be more so in meetings. Tomorrow they'll have maybe a little bit of a longer practice. Dan Campbell, this is going to be more of an unload day for the Detroit Lions, and then tomorrow they would kind of come back and it'd be normal practice tomorrow. So while there's a lot of names on here specifically with no participation, tomorrow's going to be the big day to see where guys are at, really, because as you guys can see, John Cominsky, I guess we'll just hit on it now. John Cominsky, you see his name on the bottom. This is very unfortunate news. I didn't know this was a thing right after the game. I don't know if they knew this was the thing, but apparently he had hand surgery yesterday. So I guess he dealt with a hand injury. Todd Wash said it happened in like a goal line play. It pinched his thumb, and he ended up having surgery on it yesterday. According to Todd Wash, he feels like he'll be back sooner than they expect, because he's just tough. And for Dan Campbell, he said he'll be out a little while. And it looked like on an Instagram post that he had it kind of like wrapped up. Maybe a little bit like of a cast there for Cominsky. So they didn't place him on an IR as of now that we know of. So maybe that's a good sign that he could potentially at least be getting back to practice before the 4 weeks is up. We'll see where that's at. if that's where the schedule is, or if sooner or later they just put him on that list. Regardless, though, it's definitely going to be a tough hole to fill for the Lions because Cominsky has been one of our best players to this point. Offense and defense, he's been one of the best players consistently when he's on the field. Because really, Cominsky, and we saw it in the training camp, and I was hyped about this guy. Preseason he did well, but he has done so much for this team, and his versatility is what stands out, right? His ability on run defense to come in for a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, give him a breather, play as like a strong side defensive end. Then, of course, on pass downs to kick inside and get a lot of pass rush. He gets a lot of interior push. I think they said he had 8 pressures already, which is outstanding. And if you look at Aiden Hutchinson's second sack, which they start up one of those games on the defensive line, Aiden Hutchinson was completely clean. He wasn't even blocked, and that's because Cominsky took on 2 blockers. So that stuff doesn't show up in the stat sheet for Cominsky, but he has been great. He's been one of the best players on the team to this point in terms of playing the run and also what he gives you as a pass rusher. Because while it's not the most complex, set of pass rush that he throws at you athletically, however, he is a great athlete. In his bull rush, his ability to get pressure from the inside, collapse the pocket, John Cominsky's been great for us. So this is a huge loss. I don't want this to go under the radar. This is a huge loss. And now the Lions got to figure out how they're going to replace that because he's played a lot for us. Now, Dan Campbell brought up Austin Bryant could play a little bit more. And, they could potentially bring up Demetrius Taylor from being inactive. He could be active in a game, which is very possible. I think the Austin Bryant side probably comes from, hey, look, if Aiden Hutchinson needs one, if he needs to come out for a series or whatever, then Austin Bryant can come in and kind of give him that because skill set wise, specifically against the run, he can kind of play that role, and he's one of the guys that we saw specifically in the preseason do that. He's had 1 pressure so far on 27 snaps, but in the preseason, we saw his ability to play the run and how the steps that he's been taking forward. Really, last week we didn't see him, but the week before we did because there was no Julian, and he even got some pressure in that game. So Austin Bryant's shown, and he's kind of developed into some solid depth, so he could fill in for Hutchinson when he needs some rest. I don't doubt that, and having Julian back I think is crucial because it can definitely open up the ability to use Hutchinson more on the inside because you have Julian back who can rush on the outside with Charles Harris, especially in sub packages. But it's the early downs where Demetrius Taylor could potentially be utilized if you had John Cominsky more so inside. So I think the Lions have options here, but it is a very big loss. Then you start to point to, well, how long-term is this? It doesn't sound like it's to be super long, and we'll see if he's placed on IR. If he's not, that's good news. But then you also think of Josh Paschal. And the reason I bring up Paschal is because, of course, he's on IR right now, and we don't know when he's going to be back. However, if you look like more in a long-term approach, he was coming out of the draft. Okay, of course, he played the run really well. He was an outstanding run defender that had flexibility. He could be like that strong side defensive end, so he could absolutely rotate in with Aiden Hutchinson to give him a breather. But he was also extremely versatile in the fact that where he got his pass rush was on the interior. He could get some on the edge, but he was very limited in pass rush moves, so usually turned to a bull rush or a long arm, kind of like Cominsky, but on the inside he was like a wrecking ball. So to me, when you look long term and you're not really sure where the timelines match up here, if he was able to come back before Cominsky, I could see him kind of filling into some of that role without John Cominsky. So I look at that down the road. Of course, Levi, if he's able to get back at some point, then he's another guy that could help you specifically on pass downs. If he does stay out there, he probably wouldn't, but if he does, interior pass rush, he's more of an interior player though. So regardless, it's a tough loss for the Lions. I thought we'd hit on it. You hate to see this. I really do, because I'm a huge fan of John Cominsky. This dude has been awesome for us, and especially in this game, we're gonna have our hands full, specifically against this run game. Aiden Hutchinson also pops up on this list with a finger injury. He pops up on the thigh. Okay, well, he's got a thigh too, I guess, with a thigh. So no participation there. Now again, it's Wednesday, so as of now, I'm not concerned. But if he's on here tomorrow with this, I'm very concerned. So hopefully that's not the case. He told us it was just a Charlie horse. Aiden Hutchinson is extremely tough. Okay, we know this back from college, so I think he'll be okay. We'll see, though. But with that, as we know, he had the thigh injury that he was dealing with, which kind of had him on and off the field. Like he said, he had like a Charlie horse. Todd Wash said he just got hit in the thigh in that game, so he was kind of on and off the field, but he still played through the game. And I guess Todd Wash kind of went to him and John Cominsky and told them both, like, hey, we still got work to do. You guys got to go out there and play through this and finish it. And, of course, Hutchinson will do that as well as Cominsky did because they're both tough players. So, that would obviously be huge if we didn't have him. And I don't even want to discuss that because if this is something that pops up Thursday, we'll start discussing things. But as of now, we'll leave it where it is. Jonah Jackson, finger injury. This was carryover from last week. No participation. Dan Campbell said he didn't really expect Jonah Jackson to participate today. So we'll see where that's at. Obviously, last week, Dan Skipper filled in at his position at left guard and actually didn't do a bad job. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but he didn't do a bad job for his first time. I thought he was better than Stenberg. DeAndre Swift, ankle, did not participate. Again, he played last week. According to Dan Campbell, he said they're giving Swift a breather He was at the walkthrough, and he is better right now than where he was at this time last week. And of course, he played last week, just in limited fashion. So I would say that's probably pretty optimistic, which again, this is Wednesday. You see that, and you're like, okay, so maybe they are just, kind of resting almost some of these guys, just being super cautious. You have TJ Hockenson on here with a hip, limited participation. Juju Hughes, you want to talk a guy that balled out on special teams, talk about Juju Hughes. He was outstanding, limited participation. Amani Oruwariye with a back injury, but this one's good news because he's participating again. So again, Thursday is going to be huge, but he didn't participate last week at the end of the week. He just got placed on with a back injury, so hopefully it's not serious, but getting him back would be big time. I think Will actually filled in really well. He gave up some things, but I thought he filled in actually really well when watching it back. But Amani, of course, it's great to have Amani, and I love the battle that he always has with Justin Jefferson. With that being said, though, I would anticipate we're going to see more Okudah on Justin Jefferson this week than we did last year. There was no Okudah last year, so instead it was Amani who got that. Jacobs had the other guy, whoever that was. So I would like to see Jeff get that matchup instead. I think skill set wise, I think this matches his skill set better. But Amani and him went at it. Now, I would say Jefferson definitely won both of those battles, but I thought especially the second time around, Amani kind of held his own, and he got after it with him. Frank Ragnow, limited participation with a foot injury. That's good news as well that he's back to practice, so he may be, trending the right direction. And then finally, Iffy, full participation. So we haven't seen him through the first 2 weeks. Again, I don't know what role or how big a role he'll play, even if he is able to play, but with that full participation, that's always good news. Dan said that Frank would be running around today, so there you go. Now, onto the Vikings side, as we said the name in practice today, Andrew Booth, he did not play last week. That is the rookie corner out of Clemson, one of their higher picks in this year's draft. I think he fell into the second round. He did not practice at all last week, and he didn't play last week, so they've been rocking with Patrick Peterson and Cam Dantzler as their top two cornerbacks, who have both allowed pretty high completion percentage, but both of them have allowed under 100 yards receiving. Peterson's allowed an 88 passer rating with 68 yards. That's it. And also just a sub-60 PFF grade. Meanwhile, Cameron Dantzler's allowed 11 completions on 14 targets for a 93 pass rating and 91 yards. They both actually, specifically Dantzler's actually hasn't done too bad. And then you have Harrison Smith, who's popped up on here. Now, he's going through the concussion protocol. I guess Lewis Cine only played one snap last week. They have Cameron Bynum, who's converted from cornerback to safety. The Cal guy, young players have Josh Metellus, I think the former Michigan safety as well. They got options. Lewis Cine didn't play very much, so maybe that means he plays more. I'm not sure. Regardless, though, we'll keep an eye on that one because I believe it's still the 5-step process, unless it's been updated again, which it probably has been. Last I know, it's like a 5-step process for concussion protocol, and it is a short week, which makes it less likely that you can get back. We talked about this a lot last season, but they're going to have him kind of go through that process, being the vet that he is, which kind of starts with the first phase being limited activity. The second phase is aerobic exercise. The third phase is having football-specific exercise. Then it's non-contact practice, and then finally, he's cleared in his full activity to clear the concussion protocol. So we'll follow along and see where he's at with participation to kind of get a sense of that. More players could be added to this. We'll see how this changes up as we go through the week. But that is the participation report for Wednesday, kind of just getting into this. Now, next up, I do want to talk about Dan Campbell and Todd Wash, some of the things that they said, because this will kind of trickle into specifically the run game that I wanted to touch on a little bit in this video, okay? This is not my preview / prediction, but I want to touch on some things. Campbell came out saying that, the Vikings have some firepower. At home, you're not going to really be able to hear. He said offensively, we have less of an advantage, and it puts pressure on Goff, and it puts it on the offensive line, especially if we have backups in there, or even Frank, because he hasn't practiced recently. So that's going to be something to really key in on, because Evan Brown has seemingly done well with Goff, and their adjustments and all of those types of things that they've done. They seem to be ready to go, which is awesome. But they're working on the silent count for this game. Vikings Stadium gets very loud, so they're working on that. And defensively, he said it's actually, different because they're used to being super loud and actually might be quieter because the offense is going to be on the field. So it's different for them. They're trying to do fast motion, and they're really timing it up with the cadence. Now there's no cadence. It's all silent. So timing is going to be very important this week, but I think he made a really good point there, like of a little thing that you kind of overlook. Fast motion, player still in motion. He has not stopped or settled down before the play has been snapped. That's what that is. So I think that's a really good little note that Dan Campbell made there about that being the case, because I don't think that's usually talked about. Speaking of that, though, he was asked about Goff and what he's felt like he's done well to this point. He said, of course, he brought up getting us into the right play, and he said that's not just run plays. They've also put things on his plate for pass plays as well, and he's gotten us into the right play, and he's made some throws through that. He knows what we're looking for offensively, and he's been getting us into the right play, which we highlighted that yesterday, some of that yesterday in the Ben Johnson video, who, again, I think he's been doing outstanding work. Kevin O'Connell gave him some love today. He said he likes what basically Ben Johnson has done to this point. He's done a great job to this point. But one thing we got to do is we got to continue to run the football to take as much stress off of Goff as we can, and that's the case with all quarterbacks. Take stress off them by running the football. The Lions, so far, they've been pretty good. They're leading the league with over 7 yards of carry, over 300 yards rushing. So if they keep that up, I think Goff will be all right. I think we're doing the right thing. But again, that comes to getting back into the right play, though, so that you can have some of those runs. But they're also blocking their butt off. So, give them a lot of credit. Against two good defensive lines, they've had challenges. The Lions have schemed it well, and they've also taken it to their opponents, which has been great to see. That I kind of want to talk about this run game for the Vikings, because as we all know, you think of this game, and everybody says the same thing. How do you beat the Vikings? Well, you stop the run game. And that's always the thing that pops up. And that's because that's what it is. And according to Todd Wash, he said, we kind of expect them to feed basically Dalvin Cook a little bit in this game. If you watch the last game against Philly, they only gave it to Dalvin Cook 6 times for 17 yards. O'Connell felt like maybe some of what the defense was giving them looks-wise, maybe they didn't have the opportunities to run, and they were kind of had more so the opportunities to pass the ball. But he feels like they're going to look to maybe feed him a little bit more, because 6 for 17 is not great. We know Kirk does a lot through play action. The Rams have done a lot through play action with Kevin O'Connell. And on top of that, week 1 against the Packers, he ran the ball 20 times for 90 yards in that game. Of course, they went on to win that game 23-7. But even when you watched that Vikings game against the Eagles, there were occasions where they were kind of forced to run the ball outside when they did run it. And there were also occasions where they went to multiple straight passes. There was one series where they went 3 straight passes out of the shotgun, 2 deep safeties, and 3 straight incomplete passes, and they punted. They expect that the Vikings are going to come out and try to run the football. And for the Lions defensively, their run game, specifically in the interior, has been really, really good. Now, it stings to lose Cominsky, but specifically what's been huge for this, according to Todd Wash, and you can see it when you watch him, Alim Mcneill and Isaiah Buggs have held it down. He's like, we got a lot more size in there, which is great. He loves the size. He wanted to get that. They got Buggs. Of course, they got Jones also that can back up in there. They got their size, and he said both those guys got game balls after their last game. And I think that's awesome because, we talk about the Hutchinson sacks and all of those things, but those two guys, what they did against the run to limit Gibson to 2 yards per carry, to limit McKissick to 3 carries for 9 yards, and then you watch the film of it, like there was a stretch there where Washington threw the ball 10 straight times. 10 straight times they threw the football. There was a stretch of that. And you could see literally in that game, there were times we kind of forced them to try to get outside, because what those guys have been doing specifically against the zone runs, because that's what Minnesota is, and that's what they've been, and that's what Kevin O'Connell is coming from. The heavy zone rushing team, inside, outside. They do a lot of those things. Delvin Cook does a lot of that, which is why he has all those cutback runs, all the zone rushing schemes that they do. The play side defender, whether that's Isaiah Buggs or whether that's Alim Mcneill, have been great, because not only have they been filling their lanes, but they've also not been, being moved. Once they fill the gap or fill the lane that they're supposed to, they're not getting moved out of the play either by the offensive lineman. They're holding their ground, and at the same time, there are plays like this first one that I saw where they're basically taking on 2 gaps on the interior, and that allows the linebackers to play faster. It's why I stress defensive line so much. When the defensive line is doing things like this, the linebackers can just fly around. They're not getting blocked up to the second level because our defensive linemen are being moved out of the play. The linemen get to the second level and they're picking up our linebackers. That's not happening. The defensive linemen on the interior are setting the tone right now, specifically on any of those inside and outside zone runs, because of their ability to get upfield, not lose ground, and just their penetration, even when not coming up the play, opens up a lot of other things. Linebackers are now being clean. They're playing fast. You see Malcolm and Alex, they're absolutely flying around. They look awesome. They really do. They look so different right now, but it stems from those two being dominant on the interior. And he said, we had a personal talk with them, like, hey, you two have to be really good in this game. We're being honest. If we're going to win this football game, you two got to be great. And to this point, he gave them some love last week, giving them the 2 game balls, and now they needed them to play extremely well in this game. You're talking about a heavy zone team, right? And of course, they brought in a lot of 11 personnel, but they get out of that too. They don't just run that all game long. But with that said, he also added the point that, we were going to have to stay in our gaps a little bit longer than usual. And again, that's all the zone running. Delvin Cook does a lot of cutbacks out of that, right? If there is penetration, they'll try to cut back. So you got to stay in your gaps a little bit longer, specifically on the backside. And we've seen guys like Hutchinson make plays off the backside against tight ends when the run is not ran towards him. And again, those interior guys have been doing so much for everybody else. You can see it against the run. And last week, we basically shut the team down against the run. Now, week 1, I don't know what the stats reflect as a whole. Jalen obviously ran for a lot of yards. But when you look at the running game, you look at the running backs, how we've done against them, that's what's been huge for us. It puts you in those spots where you get out the field, it's a 2nd and 9, you're forcing them to go to straight passes, you're opening up everything for your defense, and there's no rhythm for the offense when they can't ever establish a run game. So the case last week, you look at Alim Mcneill on this clip right here, his penetration into the backfield. I really think Alim Mcneill has been one of the best players on the team to this point as well, because it goes beyond just run defense for him. I think Alim Mcneill has gotten a lot of pressure. One-on-one, he has gotten a lot of push. He hasn't got the sacks or anything like that, so he may not be getting noticed, but he has gotten a lot of penetration for the Lions when one-on-one with this bull, his rip, and all those things. He's gotten a lot of that for us in pass downs, but of course against the run, he is consistently, forcing cutbacks and bouncing into the backfield and things like that. And again, now that puts, okay, hey, our guys got to stay in their gaps a little bit longer, but those two guys are going to be huge because they're going to do a lot of that. And they're probably going to say, you know what, let's run more. We only gave him the ball 6 times last week. And if you could force him to start to try to say, okay, we got to do some sweeps. We got to try to get to the outside, pull some linemen. Now you're in a good spot defensively. You're starting to play to your cornerbacks who tackle really well. You put a lot of stress on Kirk. You get into 3rd and longs. And then, of course, Aaron Glenn's going to dial up the blitzing and the pressure, which Kirk has had some problems with, specifically when there is no rush game element. He can have some issues with that. So that's the plan. And as Todd Wash said, hey, we got to earn the right to rush the passer. We're going to be able to pin our A's back, but we got to stop the run first. And he spoke on Hutchinson's 3 sacks that he had. He said, it'd been a good game if he would have, gotten the other ones that were out there. There was a couple he felt like that he could have had. He could have had 5 sacks in that game. And I think he's right. I mean, I do. There was opportunities. There was one against the tight end that stuck out to me. It was like, hey, he can make that play. It forced an intentional grounding, but he could have had a 4th sack right there. So he feels like there's opportunities, but also the expectations are high with Hutchinson. So he's setting that bar high. He knows what Hutchinson's about, and he felt like he was much more locked in this week than last week, where he was a little bit not doing exactly what he was supposed to do. But this week he was much more locked in. And again, that was the first game. They already touched on that stuff. But even look at this Vikings O-line. I mean, it's not the best O-line. It's not bad. It's really not. But they got some young guys. Garrett Bradbury's, had his ups and downs. You got rookie and Ed Ingram at right guard out of LSU. You have O'Neal at right tackle, who seemingly played pretty darn well. And then on the left side, of course, you got Ezra Cleveland. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Their left guard, and Christian Darrisaw, who has not had the best start to the season. So their O-line is not only young, but it has some issues, and it's been a concern specifically on that right interior of that offensive line, which then again, you point to Bugs, who's gotten a lot of those, and sometimes Alim Mcneill to dominate. And if they do that, you're going to have a great chance to win the game. If the Lions shut down the run, they're winning this game, I think, going away. But that's going to be the key because, of course, then you look at Justin Jefferson, and what they like to do is they like to run him across the field. They like to have these long developing routes. When you do that, it's almost impossible for a cornerback to cover. But you can't do that if you can't run the ball, because then you can't set it up. The Lions are going to have more guys in the back end. We gave him some problems. Charles Harris got some pressure. Now there was a backup, guard in there last year when Charles Harris was kind of eating, so that makes it a little bit different. But as he said, Kirk Cousins will get the ball up quickly, but he will give us some opportunities as well when he sits back there. And the way you get him to sit back, you shut down the run early, because he'll have to stay in the pocket longer to try to get the ball downfield. You're shut down the run. It's 2nd and 8. Now the pass is going to, obviously he's going to have to hold the ball a little longer. They're going to try the bootlegs and the rollouts and all of those types of things. But if you're getting 5, 6 yards a carry on 1st down, then obviously at that point, he can get the ball out quickly. He doesn't need these big chunk plays. And when he's doing that, he can set up all these chunk plays out of it, because Lions are really going to struggle to blitz when that's the situation. And we've seen that. We've seen them drop 40 on us because they've been able to run the football all over us, just gash us. That's going to be the key. Shut down Dalvin Cook, shut down this run game. And I think the Lions got the dudes to do it. And I think Alim Mcneill may be the star of the show if we do it. With that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll continue to dive into this game more. Preview/prediction probably at the end of the week. Lions on the road for the first time this season. Divisional matchup. Fighting for first place early in the season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.